Well, I mean, I have a couple. My favorite is definitely the '68 film, the original with Charlton Heston. But I also have a special place in my heart for Beneath the Planet of the Apes. That was one of those movies that I saw as a kid that terrified me. And so I remember those, the mutants, the human mutants, taking off their faces and praying to the bomb, and that stuff really gave me nightmares, and it stuck with me for years. So that's definitely one of the ones that captivated me as a kid. You know, it's an interesting, very technical answer. Um, I wanted to shoot the movie in anamorphic. I wanted to shoot the movie widescreen, but not just widescreen. I wanted to use the anamorphic lenses because they have less depth of field. And what I wanted to do was use a very, what I consider a 2D, even though we're doing the movie in 3D, naturalistic aesthetic, so that if you were shooting a group of apes, so let's say I was shooting you and there was a civilization behind you, in anamorphic lenses with the shallow focus, the apes behind you would be out of focus. And normally when you're shooting a big movie with CG, the idea is to get everything in focus, because the idea is like, oh, we're paying for each of those apes. And those things always make me feel like it's less real. So I wanted to use this aesthetic. And then when we ended up shooting in native 3D in order to do what we were going to do, it turned out you couldn't shoot anamorphic. And so as a result, I had to use different kinds of lenses. And in order to use that widescreen format, I would have had to have less depth of field and more deep focus, and it would have done all the things that I didn't want to do. So it's a very technical answer, but essentially it was because I couldn't get the look that I wanted in widescreen because I couldn't actually shoot anamorphic. So I decided that we would shoot in the other format because it allowed me to do all of the other things I wanted to do. And actually, as we started shooting, I realized that the sets that we were in were quite vertical. And so, in fact, the widescreen wasn't as well suited anyway, because we had so much stuff that was going like this that we would have had to pull way, way back to see how our sets were built. Oh, thank you. Well, John Ford was definitely a reference. You know, the Searchers and other westerns of his. I mean, Gary Oldman's introduction is sort of a ripoff of the first and last shot of the Searchers. But there were many references. I mean, Unforgiven, I think, you know, I love American westerns, and I like the revisionist ones, like Unforgiven, I think is a great movie. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to use classical movie forms but do it with apes, so that it was this strange kind of mix of something that was quite traditional with something that felt very modern, because obviously this level of visual effects and the fact that they're apes doing these things, I thought that that would create a kind of interesting resonance. And 2001 was a reference. The beginning of the movie, I was trying to do the dawn of intelligent apes instead of the dawn of man. Apocalypse Now. There were a lot of different movies that were references for sure. You know, what's interesting is that the one thing that's kind of consistent is that I'm always interested in finding a way to tell intimate stories, whether they're comedic or fantastical, that are about character. And so I don't know if I would do specifically another comedy. It really depends on whether or not there's a story that that moves me. I mean, the reason, you know, even though the comedy, the Pallbearer was a comedy, it was a story that was very personal to me. And I try to make something personal, even in something that's fantastical. I mean, Cloverfield was very personal to me. That anxiety in that movie is kind of the anxiety that I felt when I was making it, about those times and about sort of 9/11 and being at the center of terrifying circumstances. And this movie was actually very personal to me. I wanted, even though it was a Planet of the Apes movie, I wanted the movie to be about family, and I wanted it to be about an exploration of our nature. So I always try to find a personal way in, but it is true that I've made quite disparate kinds of movies. So I'm glad you liked that movie. I made that so long ago. Yeah, you know, when I shot the movie, I specifically had other people cross paths who were filming their evening as well, with the idea being that within even that one event, there were other stories that might connect out into other sort of perspectives. And I'm very interested in point of view. You know, whenever I'm making a movie, perspective and point of view is the thing that drives me the most, because I'm interested in putting you in the shoes of someone else's life experience, so that you can kind of become that person for the period of time that you're watching the movie, because that's what I like when I go to the movies. I like the way that you're transported. So we've talked about doing another Cloverfield movie, and I don't know if it'll ever come to pass or not, but it would be fun to do, I think. It'd be interesting to revisit after all this time. I just saw, when we were in London, I just saw JJ, who's filming Star Wars, and we definitely have talked about it. Oh, will they get to New York? I don't know how soon they'll get to New York. We'll see. I don't know. You know, we're still figuring out the next story now.